You were never supposed to hear this. Not from me, not from anyone. But here you are, and what I'm about to tell you will change how you sleep at night, forever. Not because it's a story, but because it really happened. And because it could happen to you. They say the most dangerous predator is the one who wears the face of a friend. And when you're on the highway, where your signal dies and the towns pass by like shadows, one wrong turn can make you part of someone else's obsession. This isn't fiction. It's a true story, set along the Golden Coast of California, where 5 young men set off on a trip to a wild party called Deltopia. They thought it was about laughter, booze, and senior year memories, but they had no idea. Someone was following them. Not a stranger, someone who already knew them. He waited, silently, smiling, watching their every move, because he wasn't there to party. He came for one reason: control, domination of the mind, to destroy them from the inside out. You see, road trips aren't just about destinations. They're liminal spaces where truth bends and identity begins to blur. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in the world is the one you invited inside yourself. This isn't just a story about a weekend. It's a story about a person who unleashed his darkness inside a trusted circle of friends. You think someone like that could never be close to you? After this story, you'll start to wonder, and that doubt will haunt you at night. This is only a warning, and we've just taken our first step into the descent. Let's rewind. The plan was simple: 5 guys, 1 car, 1 weekend, a final hurrah before graduation. The destination? Isla Vista, home of Deltopia, a beachside festival soaked in alcohol, music, and chaos. Hunter was driving. The others were Damon, Benjamin, Armin, and the narrator. All of them over 6 feet tall, cramped inside a compact car, laughing, talking trash, sweating in the sun. Typical road trip energy, until you realize what none of them knew. They weren't just heading towards something. Something was also coming for them. The road into Isla Vista was clogged. Too many cars, too many drunk students. But Hunter, the smooth talker of the group, worked his charm and got a parking spot from a random sorority girl. A small win. It felt like the universe was on their side, but the universe doesn't hand out favors for free. They crashed at Hunter's sister's apartment. Crowded, noisy, full of strangers, but safe. At least, that's what they thought. That night, they decided to pre-game. Liquor run, loud music, dumb jokes. But then, out of nowhere, they saw someone standing by the liquor store. Amir. No one had invited him. No one had even told him they were coming. And yet, there he was, hands in his pockets, like he'd been waiting for them. He fell in step with the group, uninvited, unwanted, but acting like he belonged. And that was the first red flag, because Amir wasn't a friend. He was a parasite. The kind of person who clings to social circles but never really belongs. The kind that watches from the outside, memorizing your behaviors, copying your speech patterns, slipping into your world without ever asking. No one said anything. They just kept walking. But they should have known. The worst monsters don't force their way in. They wait for you to leave the door unlocked. Amir didn't just show up. He followed them, tracked them, watched them long before they even knew it. This wasn't spontaneity. This was strategy. And that night, that was just the opening move. You ever felt it? That invisible weight in a room, the kind of presence that doesn't belong, but refuses to leave? That was Amir. When they got back to the apartment, he didn't even knock. He ran ahead of the group, looked Hunter's sister dead in the eyes, and said, "I'm staying here." Not, "Can I?" Not, "Is it okay?" Just a statement. Like he was entitled to the space. Like he already owned it. She didn't know any better. She thought he was one of the guys, but he wasn't. And when Hunter realized Amir had lied to his sister, his whole demeanor changed. He wasn't joking anymore. He wasn't amused. He was angry. He told Amir flat out, "You're not staying here. You're not welcome here. You lied. You crossed a line." But people like Amir don't respect lines. They don't hear no as rejection. They hear it as resistance. Something to be worn down, challenged, broken. So Amir stood outside the door for 20 minutes, arguing, pleading, gaslighting, trying to guilt his way back in. But Hunter stood firm. Eventually, Amir left, or so they thought. They laughed it off, took shots, made jokes about how weird it was. But none of them asked the question they should have asked. How did he find them? How did Amir know where they were staying? How did he know the liquor store, the exact block, the right moment? That kind of timing isn't luck. It's surveillance. And soon, the truth would come out. Amir had access to Hunter's set's location through iPhone sharing, which means he wasn't just following by chance. He was watching in real time, calculating, waiting for them to let their guard down. But what they didn't understand was that Amir wasn't trying to be part of the group. He wanted to invade it, to become it. Because in his mind, they didn't just exclude him. They had betrayed him. And now, he was going to make sure they paid for it. The next day was chaos. Pure coastal, sun-drenched madness. Deltopia lived up to every rumor. The streets were oceans of bodies. Every house was a rave. The air smelled like beer, sweat, and something darker. Something no one talks about. But even amid the chaos, Amir lingered in their minds, like a shadow that wouldn't burn off in the sunlight. They thought the worst was over, that they'd rejected him, pushed him away, locked the door behind him. But paranoia doesn't leave because you laugh it off, and evil doesn't vanish because you ignore it. Late that afternoon, the group returned to the apartment. 10 guys now, friends who joined in the madness. The energy was high, but something shifted the moment Rylan checked his phone. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly flat, confused, cold. He turned the screen toward them. The Find My iPhone app showed Amir's location. The dot was right on top of them. Not near, not close. On top. Everyone froze. Had he broken in again? Was he inside? But before anyone could speak, the dot started to move. Fast, like a car pulling away. Gone. It hit them all at once. He had been watching them again, not from across the street, not from a party, from a vehicle. Right outside. It was no longer weird. It was predatory. And still, they laughed it off. Nervous chuckles, shrugged shoulders. Because laughter feels better than fear, and fear forces you to make decisions you don't want to confront. But Amir wasn't just showing up. He was stalking them, tracking them, and testing the limits of what he could get away with. Because in his mind, he wasn't the intruder. They were. Intruders in his fantasy, occupants of a life he thought he was supposed to have. And when fantasy and reality clash, the explosion is always violent. They thought it was over. They hadn't seen him. He hadn't messaged them. They were safe. But safety is the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves, especially when the devil you fear already has a key to the door. Night fell like a trapdoor. The apartment dimmed. Voices faded. Bodies collapsed across floors and couches, a patchwork of intoxication and exhaustion. The chaos of Deltopia had passed, but the real danger hadn't even begun. Around 2 a.m., the narrator woke up, not to a sound, to a feeling, the kind that slithers down your spine before your mind even knows what's wrong. He sat up, confused. Everything was silent, until it wasn't. Glass shattered. Somewhere deeper in the apartment, a crash so sharp it carved through the silence like a blade. His pulse erupted. Everyone else was still out cold, too drunk, too unaware. He had no weapon, just instinct. So he grabbed the nearest thing, an empty wine bottle, and crept toward the sound. Every step felt like walking into a coffin. When he reached the living room, he saw it, the sliding glass door. Shattered. A massive rock sat on the floor surrounded by razor-edged glass. This wasn't random. This wasn't drunk vandalism. This was a message. And deep down, he already knew who sent it. He turned to run, to wake the others, when something caught his eye. The closet door handle moved. Not fully. Just enough to confirm one thing. Someone was inside. His breath locked. Every cell in his body screamed for flight. He nearly reached out to grab the handle, to confront it, to end it. But something told him no. Instead, he ran to the bedroom and woke Hunter with a single whisper. "He's here." They returned together, slowly, bottle in hand. The living room was darker than before, and the closet door was now wide open. Empty. Or so it seemed, until Hunter reached inside and pulled out a knife. Not a kitchen drawer knife, a full-sized, serrated-edge butcher's blade. Amir hadn't come to talk. He hadn't come to be accepted. He came to kill. He had been standing behind that door, waiting, listening, breathing, holding steel, just inches from ending a life. And had that door opened 1 second sooner, this story wouldn't be a story. It would be an obituary. The moment the blade touched air, the illusion shattered. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a drunk guy who went too far. This was a well-calculated invasion. They didn't just wake the others. They would snap them out of whatever dreamscape they'd been lost in. Voices raised, doors flung open. The apartment became a war zone of confusion and terror. But Amir was gone, vanished, like a ghost in borrowed skin. They searched every corner, checked every window, swept the building, even the stairwells. Nothing. It was as if the devil had melted into the walls, and that's when it hit them. They had let him in. Not just into the apartment, into their lives. Every laugh they shared, every party invite, every time they tolerated his desperation because he's just awkward or it's not worth the drama. It all led to this. The cops showed up an hour later. Standard report, questions asked, forms filled, and then the worst line a victim can hear. Things get crazy during Deltopia. You're not the only ones. Like this was normal. Like a man hiding in your closet with a knife was part of the fun. But they weren't just victims of a system. They were victims of their own silence. Because they had seen the signs. The obsession, the entitlement, the invasive behavior that escalated day by day, year by year. But they laughed it off. They let politeness overrule instinct, let guilt blur the warning signs, let not wanting to be mean turn into almost getting murdered. And that's where this story becomes more than a tale. Because there's an Amir in, quote, every group. The person who watches from the outside but never really joins, who mimics approval, who waits for the moment when no one's looking. And if you don't face them early, they don't disappear. They evolve into something worse, into something that doesn't knock. It breaks, and it waits. Just behind the door. Most people would end the story here. They'd say, "We got lucky," or "Thank God nothing happened," and then they'd move on. Shaken. Yes. Changed. Not really. But this isn't one of those stories, because the knife wasn't the end. It was the beginning. See, trauma doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it leaves questions. Questions that haunt you long after the blood drains from your adrenaline. And one question echoed in every mind that night. Why? Why did he do it? Why them? Why that moment? And that question. It burns hotter than fear. Because fear fades. But betrayal? That stays. The days that followed were fractured. The group was never the same. Some tried to shake it off. Others doubled down, obsessing over what they missed, replaying every encounter with Amir like it was a puzzle they should have solved. But the truth is more disturbing than any theory. Amir didn't break because he was crazy. He broke because he was ignored. He mistook proximity for friendship, mistook tolerance for trust, and when reality didn't align with his fantasy, he forced it. This is the psychology of the outsider, the twisted formula of a social parasite. Step 1. Insert yourself into the circle. Step 2. Demand validation, constantly, quietly, desperately. Step 3. When rejection comes, don't walk away. Destroy the circle. That's what Amir tried to do. He couldn't become them, so he decided no one else could have them either. And if you think this is rare, you're lying to yourself. Every man listening has seen this pattern. The friend who doesn't understand boundaries. The guy who jokes just a little too dark. Who shows up where he's not wanted. Who studies people more than he speaks to them. That's not awkwardness. That's data collection. You're not in a friendship. You're in a psychological operation. And the moment you make him feel powerless, he doesn't retreat. He arms himself with resentment, with entitlement, with steel, and waits. Right outside your door. Let me tell you something dangerous, something most men will never admit. But every man feels. We're not just afraid of monsters under the bed. We're afraid of the ones who wear our face. The ones who shake our hand, call us bro, and smile while plotting our silence. That's what makes stories like Amir's so terrifying. It wasn't some masked stranger in the woods. It wasn't a creature in the shadows. It was someone inside the circle. Someone they tolerated. And here's the brutal truth. Tolerating a threat is how you become the victim of one. Men are taught to keep things cool, not to escalate, not to be that guy who calls someone out too hard. So we joke. We brush things off. We suppress instinct in the name of harmony. And that's exactly what lets predators evolve. Because someone like Amir, he feeds on hesitation. He studies your unwillingness to confront him. And every time you let something slide, he records it. And when enough of those unchecked moments pile up, he acts. Not like a killer in a movie, but like someone with a script. A mental narrative where he's the protagonist, you're the enemy, and the ending. It's written in blood. That's why this story matters. Not because it's rare, but because it's common. Unspoken, repeated. In friend groups, on campuses, at jobs, in dorm rooms, cars, basements. Anywhere a man feels like the world owes him power and someone else is standing in the way. And if you still think this is just a story, then ask yourself something right now. In your life, who's the one you keep around even though something about him feels off? Who always knows where you are, but you never really know where he is? Who shows up uninvited, but never leaves? This isn't paranoia. It's preparation. Because the next time you hear glass shatter in the middle of the night, you might not have time to reach for the wine bottle. Here's the part no one talks about. After the cops leave, after the doors are locked, after the fear has cooled into memory, you're left with something worse than trauma. Doubt. Not about him. About yourself. You start questioning everything. Why didn't I say something sooner? Why did I laugh it off? Why did I let him that close? And if you're not careful, that self-doubt becomes a silent infection. It poisons your trust. It clouds your instincts. It rewrites how you see every new person that enters your life. Because once you've looked into the eyes of someone who was smiling one day and hiding behind your closet door the next, you never see people the same again. That's the hidden cost. Not the broken glass, not the police report. The cost is your ability to feel safe. Every shadow becomes a shape. Every knock becomes a threat. Every, "Hey man, I was just in the area," feels like a test. And here's the darkest part. He doesn't even need to return. He's already in your head, living rent-free, a ghost without dying, an echo you didn't invite, but now can't shut out. That's how psychological predators win. Not always through violence, but through presence. By making you second-guess your own radar, by making you afraid of being over-dramatic, by training you to keep the peace, even when the war has already begun. So listen closely, especially if you've made it this far. This isn't just about Amir. It's about you. Because everyone has someone in their past they let in too far. And if you don't learn the pattern now, you'll meet it again. With a different name, a different smile, a different door. And maybe next time you won't hear the glass. Maybe next time you'll open that closet. Alone. Now we enter the part of the story most people can't handle. The Sami aftermath. Because horror doesn't end when the threat is removed. It begins when you realize the threat was invited. And here's the real horror. You knew something was off. Maybe not in words, but you felt it. That micro-hesitation. That sick pull in your gut when he laughed at the wrong time, stood too close, asked questions no one else would ask. You felt it, and you ignored it. That's the battlefield every man walks daily. We've been trained to override our instincts, to keep the peace, to avoid confrontation. Because that's what mature men do, right? But here's the truth that will split you wide open. Instinct is ancient. It's older than logic, older than society. It was built to keep you alive. And when you silence it in favor of politeness, you invite in every monster with a charming smile and a bruised ego. The group in this story, they didn't just survive Amir, they survived themselves. Because the real fight wasn't against him, it was against the voice in their head saying, "Don't make it weird. He's probably just lonely. He's not that bad." Those lies almost got them killed. And if you think you're stronger, more aware, too smart to be caught in a situation like this, that's exactly what makes you vulnerable. Because predators like Amir, they don't choose their prey at random. They choose people who let them in. People who confuse niceness with safety. People like you. So now I'm going to ask something of you. Something symbolic. Something you're going to drop in the comments to show the algorithm who this video is for. And more importantly, to show yourself who you're becoming. Type this phrase, "Never again." Twice. Not once. Twice. Because the first one is for the version of you that ignored the signs. And the second, that's for the man who's waking up now. The one who never lets it happen again. Something changes in you after an encounter like this. Not just emotionally, but biologically. Your brain rewires itself. Fight or flight becomes a constant background hum. You start scanning every room, measuring exits, judging the energy of people before they even speak. You become aware, not paranoid, not broken. Awake. That's the gift no one talks about. The hidden blessing behind the curse of trauma. It sharpens you. It refines your senses. It teaches you that the world isn't made of rules. It's made of power. And the people who survive aren't the ones who follow the rules. They're the ones who know when to break them. Amir operated on that same logic. He believed no one would stop him. That social rules, friendships, kindness, inclusion, could be manipulated, weaponized. And the truth is, he was right. Until someone did stop him. Because once you see what someone's capable of, you can't unsee it. You either shrink away from it, or you rise above it. The narrator of this story rose. So did Hunter. So did the entire group. Not just by confronting Amir, but by confronting the part of themselves that allowed him in. And that's where true strength begins. Not in the muscles, not in the weapons, not in the threats, but in the clarity of knowing, I will never ignore the signs again. I will never silence my instincts again. I will never let comfort take priority over survival. Because this isn't about just one psycho at a party. It's about the thousands of men like him who hide in plain sight. At your job, in your gym, in your friend group. The ones who don't wear masks because they don't have to. They wear familiarity. And that's what makes them lethal. But once you learn to see through it, once you accept that danger can wear a smile, you stop living in fear. And you start living with Pan in command. Command doesn't come from dominance. It comes from awareness. From seeing every layer beneath the surface, the words unsaid, the eyes that don't match the smile, the tension behind the laugh. And once you've survived something like Amir, you become fluent in these signs. You start spotting it in others. That clingy desperation masked as friendliness. The invasive curiosity passed off as interest. The emotional manipulation framed as honesty. You see it all, because now, you mati. The language of predators. And here's what no one tells you. You don't just learn it once. You keep learning. Because darkness doesn't knock once. It tests the lock again and again, waiting for the day you're tired, distracted, lonely. But if you've made it this far, you've already crossed a threshold most men never do. You've admitted that evil can come from people you know, that trust can be a weapon, that your circle must be protected not by inclusion, but by discernment. Not everyone deserves access to your life. Not everyone gets to sit at your table just because they're persistent, just because they act like they belong. Persistence is a trait shared by stalkers. Belonging is something earned. Amir didn't want belonging. He wanted possession. He wanted to dominate their comfort zone, to infest their home, their minds, their memories. And in that sense, he almost won. Because for weeks after that night, the group lived in a fog, checking their locks 3 times, avoiding eye contact at parties, looking over their shoulders in parking lots. But then something shifted. They stopped blaming each other, stopped replaying the night, and they started learning. That instinct is a gift, not a glitch. That confrontation is protection, not aggression. That trust should never be given by default, only by earned proof over time. And that sometimes, the man you need to become is forged in the fire of the one who tried to destroy you. The threat is real, but so is your evolution. There's a moment, after the adrenaline fades, after the questions stop swirling, when something deeper settles in your bones. Resolve. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not the kind of thing you post about online. It's quiet, heavy, permanent. It's the moment when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What did this wake up in me?" That's where the transformation begins. Because every man faces a crossroads in life, the day innocence dies, when the world stops being just potential and starts revealing its predators. You don't get to choose if it happens, only what kind of man you become after. Some men collapse. They become anxious, numb, reactive. They shut everyone out. They retreat into isolation, thinking that silence will shield them. But silence doesn't protect. It invites the next threat in quietly. Other men, they rise. They embrace discomfort. They rewire their instincts. They sharpen their circle. They stop trying to be liked by everyone and start becoming dangerous to manipulate. That's what this story is really about. Not a mirror, not the knife, not the shattered glass. It's about that exact moment when a group of regular men saw something dark in front of them, and then something darker inside themselves. The part that knew, deep down, they had allowed this. And instead of burying that truth, they used it, turned it into steel, turned it into discipline, turned it into a vow. Never again. So ask yourself right now, which version of you is living today? The one who avoids confrontation, or the one who walks toward it with clarity? The one who doubts himself, or the one who reads every room like a battlefield? Because no one's coming to save you. And the monsters? They don't knock. They wait until you're asleep on the floor. And then they reach for the knife. Do you understand now? This wasn't a random event. It wasn't just one crazy guy. It was a microcosm of something far bigger. A reflection of a world we're trained not to see. We live in a society where psychological predators thrive. Why? Because they're protected by rules. By don't make it weird. By give people the benefit of the doubt. By he probably didn't mean it. But let me tell you what Amir meant. He meant to dominate that space. He meant to insert himself by force. He meant to control the narrative, to twist the idea of friendship into permission for obsession. And the scariest part? He almost succeeded. Because they didn't shut the door. Not early enough. This is the cancer of weak boundaries. It starts small. An unwanted text. An uninvited appearance, a guilt trip, a harmless lie. But like all cancers, it grows until it becomes a threat to the whole organism. Society is full of Amirs, men with a deep sense of rejection, no emotional structure, and a dangerous belief that closeness can be taken when it isn't given. And most people will never see it coming. Why? Because they're too busy being polite, too afraid of hurting feelings, too worried about being the bad guy. But let me be perfectly clear. The bad guy is the one who hides in your closet with a knife. Not the man who calls him out, not the one who says no. Not the one who locks the door and dares him to try again. That's not cruelty. That's protection. That's command. That's what every man must embrace if he wants to survive this world of manipulation, obsession, and psychological warfare. Because this isn't about being tough, it's about being aware. About seeing the danger before it wears the mask of just a friend. And once you see it, you don't laugh it off. You don't wait for it to escalate. You end it. Fast, hard, completely. Because trust isn't given, it's earned. And once broken, it's a weapon pointed straight at your life. We go deeper. Because this story isn't just a personal cautionary tale. It's a blueprint. A crack in the mirror of modern masculinity. A hidden truth about how systems fail us. You see, no one taught them how to deal with someone like Amir. Not their parents, not their schools, not even the culture they were raised in. They were taught to be chill, to be forgiving, to laugh it off, to avoid drama. But predators thrive in that gap, the space between your discomfort and your decision. Amir didn't need to be strong. He just needed to know that no one else would act first. He banked on their hesitation. He weaponized their civility. And it almost worked. This is how weak systems of social defense operate. They make men feel guilty for setting boundaries. They frame assertiveness as aggression. They label instinct as overreaction. But make no mistake, the modern world has built men to be polite prey. They are discouraged from confrontation, trained to avoid tension, taught to confuse empathy with submission. But when evil enters the room, empathy won't save you. Only clarity will. You don't negotiate with someone who follows you, stalks your location, and hides behind your closet door with a knife. You respond. Swiftly, decisively, permanently. The most dangerous myth in today's culture is that all problems can be solved through kindness. That if you're just nice enough, patient enough, understanding enough, you'll melt the monster. But monsters don't melt. They study. And when they realize your kindness is weakness, they strike. That's what Amir saw. Not a group of friends. A group of targets trained to hesitate. But the ones who survive this world, the ones who thrive, are those who stop mistaking politeness for peace and start walking the earth with discernment like a sword. Because you're not just protecting your space, you're defending your mind. And once someone infiltrates that, once they rewrite the laws of your safety, the war isn't just physical anymore. It becomes spiritual. There's a certain silence that follows trauma, not the absence of sound, but the absence of illusion. You don't look at people the same way. You don't step into rooms the same way. Because now, you carry something no one else can see. Knowledge. The kind that costs you sleep. The kind that stains your memory like blood on white cloth. The kind that makes you realize this world isn't safe. It never was. You were just shielded by ignorance. And now, you see everything. You see how easy it is for someone to infiltrate, to blend in, to mimic connection just enough to bypass your internal alarms. Amir didn't barge in with rage. He slipped in through the back door of sympathy. That's the new predator profile. They don't show up fuming. They show up wounded. The broken guy, the lonely one, the misunderstood friend, and suddenly, the burden of their healing falls on you. But here's the truth most men avoid. You are not a rehab center for unstable people. You're not obligated to house someone's chaos just because they're persistent, just because they're charming, just because they make you feel guilty for having boundaries. That guilt, that's the virus. It gets inside you, and it rewrites the code. Makes you question your instincts. Makes you soften when you should harden. Makes you apologize for saying no. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're standing in your own living room, looking at a shattered door and praying that the man hiding in your closet doesn't come out swinging. This is how men die. Not in wars, not in car crashes, in moments where they doubted themselves at the exact second they needed to act. So let me say it plain. Your safety is your responsibility. No one else's, not the cops, not your friends, not society. If you want peace, you must become the kind of man who can enforce it. Because monsters don't fear good intentions. They fear prepared men. There's something sacred about a man who's been tested by darkness, not broken by it, forged by it. You can see it in his eyes. He walks slower. He speaks with intention. He doesn't chase approval. He scans every environment like a lion with centuries of instinct. That's not trauma. That's on calibration. Because once you've stood inches from the knife, once you've felt the air tighten with the presence of something unnatural, you don't waste energy on shallow things anymore. You evolve, but evolution comes at a cost. You lose a part of yourself, the carefree boy, the people pleaser, the one who wanted everyone to feel included. He dies. And in his place, a protector is born, not just for yourself, but for your circle, your future, your domain. That's what this story should awaken in you. Not fear, not paranoia, but authority. The awareness that your energy is territory, and not everyone deserves access. The truth is, you'll meet more Amirs in life. Not with the same name, not with the same methods, but the same more core. Entitlement masked as friendship. Obsession disguised as loyalty. Insecurity that grows claws the moment you say no. And the next time, you won't be caught off guard. Because now you recognize the pattern, the sudden interest, the subtle manipulation, the social mimicry. They pretend to be part of your tribe until you challenge them, until you assert boundaries, until you remind them that access to you isn't a right, it's a privilege. And when they push, you don't flinch, you don't explain, you don't beg for understanding. You make it clear. You're not welcome here. You will not cross this line. You will not mistake my silence for softness ever again. That is how you reclaim power. Not by being louder, but by being undeniable. This is your new reality, where every step forward is taken with eyes wide open. There's a truth buried in the bones of every man, but most spend their whole lives running from it. You are at war. Not with the world, not even with people like Amir, but with your own. blindness. You've been taught to lower your guard, to compromise for comfort, to believe that all darkness comes with warning signs, that evil will announce itself with red flags and sirens. It doesn't. It whispers. It smiles. It blends. The most dangerous people in your life will never look dangerous. They'll be the ones who mirror you, who know what to say, who act just close enough to make you feel bad for pulling away. And by the time you realize they're feeding on your energy, your dead space, your dead is silence, they're already inside. Amir wasn't the end of a horror story. He was the beginning of an awakening, a reminder that every man must carry a code, a broad non-negotiable code that says, I don't allow chaos in my home. I don't entertain guilt-based manipulation. I don't apologize for trusting my instincts. I don't confuse kindness with surrender. This code isn't built in therapy rooms or Instagram posts. It's built in fire, in the tension between what's comfortable and what's necessary. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't get stronger by avoiding conflict. You get stronger by facing it, resolving it, commanding it. That's why Amir ran, because deep down, he knew he wasn't dealing with the same passive men anymore. He was dealing with witnesses. Men who now saw the blueprint, who understood the mask, who wouldn't laugh off the next red flag. And that's what predators fear most. Not weapons, not cops, not locks, but awakened men. Men who will not play dumb. Men who see the game and end it before it begins. So remember this. The threat may change names. It may change faces. But it never changes its pattern. And now, neither do you. You'll watch your friends laugh off red flags. You'll hear them say, he's just awkward. He doesn't mean anything by it. Don't overthink it. And inside you'll feel that tension, that instinct screaming, they don't see it yet. But I do. That's the cost of awareness. When you start recognizing patterns, you also start realizing how few people do. But don't mistake that solitude for weakness. That's the path of leadership. Because when chaos comes knocking, they won't know what to do. You will. You'll be the one who says, lock the door. He's not coming in. I don't care if it feels harsh. This is survival. And that's what every man listening needs to understand. We don't need more nice guys. We need more guardians. Men who understand that protection isn't about violence. It's about presence. About being so grounded in who you are, so certain in your boundaries that no one even dares to test them. Amir didn't pick that group at random. He picked them because they had weak edges, because he sensed the doubt, because he believed they would let him in. And for a while they did. But now they're different. Because once a man tastes danger, real danger, and survives it, he never moves the same again. He studies, he trains, he prepares. He doesn't wait for the world to give him safety. He builds it. Brick by brick, decision by decision, moment by moment. And maybe that means losing people. Maybe that means saying no more often. Maybe that means walking away from anything that smells like dependency, manipulation, or masked obsession. But it also means this: you live, you thrive, you stay in command of your space, your mind, your future. And the next time someone like Amir knocks, they won't find a door. They'll find a wall. Here's something no one teaches you, but every awakened man eventually learns. Evil is subtle. It doesn't scream. It doesn't foam at the mouth. It doesn't come wrapped in darkness and dripping menace. No, it shows up clean, smiling, looking like someone you might have known for years. That's why it's so effective, because your mind wants to protect the image, not the reality. Your brain says, he's not that bad. It's probably nothing. I'm just being dramatic. And with every one of those thoughts, you lower your shield. That's what Amir exploited. He didn't need force. He needed bad doubt. He didn't break in through the window. He came through invisibility. Through your need to keep the peace. Through your fear of seeming paranoid. Through your addiction to social comfort. That's why this story hits deeper than just a bad weekend. Because it reflects something ancient in the male psyche. The need to belong versus the need to defend. And when the balance tips too far toward belonging, you become vulnerable to people who were never meant to sit at your table. Here's the rule. If your gut says something's off, listen. No debate, no negotiation, no guilt, just action. You don't need 1,000 reasons. You need one clear signal. That's all it takes to protect yourself. Because what's worse, hurting someone's feelings, or finding yourself in a dark room, heart pounding, gripping a wine bottle while someone waits behind a closet door with a blade and a fantasy? That's the real choice. And you'll make it more than once in your life. The world is full of broken men trying to remake reality in their image. You are not their therapist. You are not their lifeline. You are not their correctional facility. You are your own fortress. And any man who attempts to breach it without honor, respect, or invitation deserves 0 second chances. Remember that. Because the ones who hesitate, they don't make it. There's a reason stories like this get buried, ignored, labeled as isolated incidents or overreactions. Because if people actually faced what they reveal, if they stared deep into the black heart of the pattern, they'd have to admit something terrifying. That society isn't built to protect you. It's built to keep you complacent. The institutions, they file reports, they log complaints, they offer sympathy, but they rarely deliver justice. Because justice, true justice, requires action, not paperwork. When Amir shattered that glass door, he didn't just break into an apartment. He broke through the illusion that the system would ever stop someone like him. And the cops? They filled out a form. That's it. No follow-up. No accountability. Just another line in a folder collecting dust. And this is where the world separates into two kinds of men. Those who wait for help, and those who become their own weapon. Not in rage, not in chaos, but in clarity. Because once you realize the rules don't apply to everyone, once you see how predators operate outside the system and still get away with it, you stop playing fair. You start playing real. That's what they did. The group that survived Amir didn't just get lucky. They evolved. They sharpened. They became students of energy, pattern, proximity. And they never went back to sleep. Because once you see the cracks in the structure, you can't unsee them. You stop relying on outside forces to save you. You stop hoping someone else will say what you're afraid to. You stop fantasizing about a safe world and start building your own code of war. A personal doctrine. A way of seeing and filtering and eliminating threats before they bloom. You become what Amir never expected. Prepared. And let me tell you something about prepared men. We don't ask for warnings. We are the warning. Every man reaches a threshold in life. A moment so raw, so real, so deeply unsettling, that it splits him in two. Before the threshold, he's reactive, hopeful, blindly trusting, believing people mean well if you give them the benefit of the doubt. After the threshold, he becomes something else. Measured, calm, sharp. Not because he wants to be cold, but because the warmth of ignorance nearly got him killed. That moment, standing in that apartment, looking at a shattered door and a knife in a closet, that was the threshold. It was the line where fear ended and awakening began. Because let's be brutally honest, Amir didn't come back because he was lonely. He didn't come back to apologize. He came back with intent. Intent to violate, to control, to send a message. He wanted them to feel his presence even if he didn't speak a word. That's how true predators operate. Silence is their weapon. Subtlety is their camouflage. Obsession is their fuel. And once you've encountered one, you begin to see them everywhere. In the guy who just shows up at your gym uninvited. In the coworker who always pushes too far with his jokes. In the friend of a friend who never hears the word no. They come in different costumes, but the pattern stays the same. And now you recognize it. You see how calm becomes control. How friendly becomes surveillance. How misunderstood becomes manipulation. Because you've walked through the fire. You faced the moment where everything could have gone very differently. And you didn't fold. Now that fire lives inside you. It sharpens your boundaries. It silences your hesitation. It reminds you, I don't owe anyone access. I don't explain my instincts. I don't wait for permission to protect my life. This is the man who survives. This is the man who leads. Not because he talks the loudest, but because he sees before it happens. And he's willing to end it before it begins. There's a difference between a man who's read about danger and a man who's looked it dead in the eye. One flinches, the other decides. This group, these college guys on what was supposed to be a party trip, they were forced to make that decision. Not because they wanted to, but because reality kicked the door down. And when that door shattered, so did every illusion they had about safety. Here's what no one teaches young men. Danger doesn't wait for maturity. It doesn't care how old you are, how many friends you have, or how many followers you've collected. It strikes when you're vulnerable, when you're tired, when you've convinced yourself that the people around you are just quirky or a little off, but ultimately harmless. That's the mistake they made with Amir. They tolerated him. They brushed off the red flags. They let him walk beside them. Let him join their group without invitation. Let him lie his way into their space. All because they didn't want to be rude. But you know what rude gets you? A knife behind a closet door. Because when you ignore your gut, when you prioritize comfort over clarity, when you think giving someone the benefit of the doubt is more important than preserving your perimeter, You hand them the keys to your peace. This story isn't just about fear. It's about the price of hesitation. And what happens when good men fail to act at the first sign of rot? They were lucky. They acted just in time. But next time, it might not end with a shattered door. It might end with a headline, a body, a long silence no one knows how to explain. That's why I'm telling you this. Not to scare you, but to arm you. Because no one is coming to save you. The system is slow. Your friends might doubt you. And evil is always one step ahead if you're not paying attention. But if you are, if you train yourself to see, to feel, to act, then you're not just surviving. You're dominating the battlefield. And no predator survives that. Here's the moment where everything changes, not in the story, but in you. Because you're not just listening anymore, you're remembering. Somewhere in your past, you've met an Amir. Maybe not as extreme, maybe not with a knife, but he wore the same mask. He inserted himself into your life the same way. He ignored your boundaries. He manipulated group dynamics. He used guilt as a currency, and you let it slide. Once, twice, because no one had taught you what to look for, until now. This is your owl, line in the sand. The place where the old version of you dies. The one who stayed quiet to avoid drama. The one who rationalized red flags. The one who thought instincts were just anxiety. From this point forward, you see with new eyes. And to anchor this shift, I want you to comment this phrase twice. Right now. The mask never fools me again. The mask never fools me again. Type it, claim it, burn it into your identity, because that's what this is really about. Not one night in Santa Barbara, not one disturbed man, but the foul awakening of a new code. A code that rewrites how you move through life, who you let near you, what you tolerate, and what you protect with your Bible soul. You are not a passive observer anymore. You are a gatekeeper, a filter, a force. You don't chase comfort. You chase clarity. You don't ask if someone deserves a second chance. You ask if your peace can afford one more risk. Because peace is earned through vigilance, through discipline, through a relentless refusal to let chaos wear a friendly face. Remember this. Every predator studies your softness. Every manipulator watches your reactions. Every parasite waits for you to question your own worth just long enough to slide in. But from this day forward, you don't hesitate, you don't explain, you don't doubt, you stand. Because the mask, it never fools you again. There's a reason ancient warriors carved symbols into their blades. It wasn't decoration, it was kit intention. They understood that every tool of survival needed a soul, a code behind the steel. You are no different. Your mind is your weapon. Your boundaries are your armor. Your awareness is the blade you draw before danger even reveals itself. And the moment you declared, "The mask never fools me again," you etched your first mark in that weapon. Now you must learn to wield it. Because here's the next truth. Predators don't stop. They adapt. They come back in new forms. A coworker who seems too friendly. A roommate who always crosses small lines. A stranger who insists on being included. And every time you'll feel it in your nervous system before your brain can explain it. A tightening. A shift, a pressure that says, this doesn't feel right. That's not paranoia. That's real preparation. Because when society fails to teach men how to protect themselves, when the system shrugs and says, it's just how people are, then you become the system. You become the final checkpoint, the last door they'll never get through. The man who ends the pattern, not just for yourself, but for everyone who watches you and learns. Because make no mistake, you are being watched by your younger self, by the men in your circle, by the boys who don't know yet what evil looks like when it smiles. Your example becomes their blueprint, and that blueprint must be ruthless in its clarity. No more second-guessing, no more emotional babysitting, no more allowing disrespect just because it's wrapped in a joke. From here on out, your space is sacred, your time is guarded, your instincts are law. You don't explain your peace, you enforce it. Because this world doesn't need more agreeable men, it needs more sentinels, more guardians of energy, of truth, of psychological sovereignty. And that's exactly what you've just become. There's a kind of silence that follows power. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of mastery. And that's where you're heading now. Because the deeper you go into this awareness, the less you need to prove. The less you speak just to fill the room. The less you chase validation from people who never earned access to your presence. That's what changed in those men after that night. They weren't loud about it. They didn't post warnings or vengeance fantasies. They didn't start drama online. They simply became unmistakably different. They started walking like they meant it. Started locking their doors without hesitation. Started reading energy instead of words. Started saying no without apology. That's the real transformation. Not louder, not angrier, just sharper. Because when you survive a brush with real danger, you don't come back as the same man. You come back as a mirror to everything soft in others, and it makes them uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're too intense, that you don't trust people anymore. But that's not your burden. That's just projection. They're not mad at you. They're mad that they still live in the fantasy you escaped from. The illusion that the world is fair, that people mean well by default, that evil needs a reason. You've seen too much for that now. You know that danger is often born in subtle entitlement, unchecked obsession, and the silence of good people who didn't want to make it awkward. And you'll never be silent again. From now on, you speak through action, through presence, through stillness so composed that no predator even attempts the first move. Because power doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be undeniable. And that's what you are now. Undeniable in your truth. Unshakable in your boundaries. Unreachable by anything or anyone that doesn't respect your bond code. You are no longer living for safety. You're living for sovereignty. There's a reason why ancient civilizations placed warriors at the gates, not politicians, not merchants, not priests. Warriors. Because the first line of defense against chaos, darkness, and deception was always the man who had seen it all and refused to let it pass. You are that man now, because when you've experienced what we've just walked through, when you've witnessed obsession disguise itself as friendship, when you've felt the chill of evil just inches away, you don't just understand danger, you embody the antidote. Not by hiding, not by fearing every stranger, but by cultivating the mindset of a man who doesn't need to see the knife to sense the threat. That's what they missed with Amir. They saw the behavior, but they ignored the energy. And energy never lies. It always whispers before it screams. The stare that lingers too long. The laughter that doesn't match the moment. The silence after being told no. It's there, for those trained to notice it. And from this moment forward, you are trained. You are the sentinel of your circle. You are the quiet barrier that chaos doesn't cross. You are the wall between disorder and the people you care about. And here's the paradox. That kind of power, it makes you more peaceful. not less. Because real power doesn't react. It anticipates. Real power doesn't chase validation. It respects itself first. Real power doesn't need attention. It becomes the standard. That's who you are now. The man who sees everything. The man who speaks only when it matters. The man whose presence says more than words ever could. And when someone like Amir comes around again, you won't flinch. You won't doubt. You won't debate. You'll see the mask. You'll feel the pattern. And you'll shut it down. Before it even begins. Because while others are still waiting to be told what's happening, you already know. Most men think the war is out there, in politics, in headlines, in other countries. But the real war, it's inside the home, inside the dorm, inside the car at 1 a.m. when someone knocks who should have never known your location. It's in the quiet moments when your boundaries are tested not by strangers, but by people who wear the face of a friend. That's what makes it harder. Because if Amir had worn a ski mask, if he had broken in screaming, if he had threatened them openly, it would have been obvious. But he didn't. He smiled, he blended, he followed, he waited. And that's why he was so dangerous. Because modern predators don't need weapons. They use proximity. They gain access through loyalty. They didn't earn. Friendships. They never reciprocate. And social blindness. We're all conditioned to uphold. But that conditioning dies today. You don't owe access to anyone. You don't need a reason to say no. You don't have to feel guilty for protecting what's sacred. Because what's sacred isn't just your space. It's your state, your clarity, your instinct, your mental sovereignty. That's what Amir was trying to shatter when he threw that rock through the door. Not just glass, but a piece. He wanted back in. He wanted them confused, disoriented, arguing. Because when you're in chaos, you're not in control. But when you are centered, when you are calm and cold and alert, you become a fortress. And evil hates fortresses, because fortresses don't entertain pity plays. Fortresses don't care if you're just having a hard time. Fortresses don't get manipulated by the soft-spoken requests of people with sharp intentions. So ask yourself this. Are you a house with the lights on and doors unlocked? Or are you a gate forged from experience and sealed by fire? Because when the next knock comes, and it will, you won't have time to debate. You'll either act from emotion, or you'll act from code. And men who act from code don't just survive, they dominate. There comes a moment in every man's journey when he must decide what kind of legacy he'll leave behind. Not money, not status, not followers, but an impact. And the most powerful impact a man can leave in this world is clarity. Clarity of boundaries, clarity of energy, clarity of presence. Because the truth is, most people live in a fog. They don't see the danger until it's breathing down their neck. They don't trust their instincts until it's too late. They don't recognize manipulation until it's become a routine. But you've been through the fire. You know what it sounds like when danger whispers from across the room. You know what it feels like when your gut screams while your mind tries to rationalize, and you'll never ignore it again. Because the legacy of a man who sees is a life that no longer invites chaos. You won't attract parasites because you don't bleed insecurity. You won't attract stalkers because your energy doesn't welcome the weak-willed. You won't attract manipulators because they know the second they enter your space, they'll be exposed. That's what power does. It creates repellence. You won't need to confront people anymore. They'll feel it. They'll sense it. They'll back away without you even having to speak. And those who don't, they get removed. Quickly, cleanly, without guilt. Because you don't make space for confusion anymore. You don't entertain maybes. You don't keep the door cracked just in case they might change. That was the old you. The new you walks with silence that warns, with eyes that calculate, with energy that tells the whole damn room, I don't play with fire, I extinguish it. That is legacy, not popularity, not approval, but a life so precise, so disciplined, so forged in awareness, that even the shadows fear your name. You've heard the phrase, stay dangerous, but most men get it wrong. They think it means be violent, loud, unhinged. But that's not danger. That's desperation. Real danger, true high-level masculine power, is stillness. It's sitting in a room full of noise and saying nothing, because your presence already speaks more than enough. It's the way you enter a space and the energy subtly shifts. It's the way people second-guess their disrespect because something about you says, this man knows things he doesn't say. That's what Amir didn't anticipate. He thought he was dealing with boys. But what he walked into was men who had been sharpened by fire, silence, and instinct. Men who didn't argue. Men who didn't try to fix him. Men who just knew he wasn't supposed to be there. And that kind of knowing, that's what you're building now? It's not theory anymore. It's not motivation. It's memory. A system rewired by hard-earned experience. You don't need a weapon in your hand when you carry war in your spirit. And every man watching this who's ever felt something was off, ever ignored that twinge in his gut, ever stayed quiet just to avoid conflict. You are the target of this awakening, because the next Amir won't wait for you to be ready. He won't knock twice. He won't send a warning. He'll test your defenses, your perception, your ability to say no before things go too far. And if you haven't locked that identity in, you'll learn the hard way. But not you, because you've walked through all 29 sections before this. You've faced the shadows. You've remembered what your instincts sound like. And now you carry a new frequency, one that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't fear. You walk like a man who's already been to the edge and came back with Wamni, vision. And vision is the deadliest weapon of all. The world will never tell you this, but every man who becomes powerful, truly powerful, does so in silence. In the moments no one sees. In the decisions no one celebrates. In the rooms where he stands alone and says, never again. That's what happened in that apartment. It wasn't just about Amir. It wasn't even about survival. It was a rite of passage. One of those sacred, terrifying moments where you are forced to decide, do I stay soft? Or do I become the man I was meant to be? And they chose. They chose not to be victims. They chose not to be passive. They chose not to live in the illusion that everything will work itself out. Because nothing works itself out. You either act, or you get acted upon. There is no middle ground. And that's the unspoken truth no one teaches you in school. No influencer dares to admit, and no motivational video will say out loud. The real enemy is hesitation. It's not Amir. It's not the system. It's not even darkness. It's the split-second delay where your instincts say move, and your fear says wait. That hesitation is where lives are lost. Minds are broken. Souls are compromised. But the man who's seen that hesitation, the man who has felt what it almost cost him, he never waits again. He becomes the one who acts decisively, calmly, without asking for permission. And that's you now. You've moved beyond theory, beyond fear, beyond the need to be liked. You've stepped into the domain of those who see and act, and you'll never go back. From here, every decision you make will ripple with weight. Every room you enter will carry the echo of this initiation, because you're not just a man anymore. You're a bow force, a sentinel. And when the world tests you again, and it will, you won't flinch. You'll respond with truth. And truth, backed by action, is unstoppable. There's something sacred about the man who's been tested and did not break. Not because he's fearless, but because he understood one core truth. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it. That's what forged the men in this story. Not a campus party, not a confrontation, but the moment one of them stood at the edge of that closet, a wine bottle in hand, heart pounding, and made a choice. I will not die tonight. That moment didn't just save him, it transformed him. Because when you face something that could have ended your story and you survive it, you begin to write a new story. One where you're no longer reacting to life, but mastering it. And that's what this entire journey has built toward. Mastery. Not just of others, not even of situations, but of yourself. Because the man who has mastered his instincts, who doesn't doubt his gut, who doesn't negotiate his peace, who doesn't allow energy that drains or distorts, he becomes untouchable. Not because danger disappears, but because it no longer recognizes him as prey. This is where the old identity dies completely. You're no longer the nice guy, the overthinker, the one who needed more proof. You are a guardian now, not just of your space, but of truth itself. You will be the one your brothers call when things go sideways. You will be the one who senses the shift before it becomes a threat. You will be the one who doesn't need a reason to protect the sacred, because your life has become the reason. And from here on out, every relationship, every decision, every breath will radiate that unshakable knowing. I've seen the dark, and I didn't run. I became the one who ends it. This is the end of the story, but it's the beginning of your new era. Because if you've made it here, you're not just a viewer, you're not just a listener, you're a man who's been reborn through fire, through silence, through reflection, through the kind of raw psychological exposure that most people avoid their entire lives. And now you carry something no one can fake. Gravitas. Weight. Depth. Presence that speaks even when you say nothing at all. Because you've walked through the cave, you've looked the monster in the eye, and you realized it was never outside you. It was the part of you that was still waiting for approval, still hoping to be liked, still unsure whether your voice had value. But that part is gone now, burned in the fire, Buried in the night, you chose instinct over explanation. Left behind in the moment, you said, no more access, no more weakness, no more compromise. From this point forward, you are dangerous in the right way. You don't flinch, you don't stall, you don't apologize for seeing the pattern before it explodes. You move with cold clarity and hot conviction. You protect what's yours like a lion on the edge of empire. You respect your space like it's holy ground. And most importantly, you never let evil disguise itself again. Not in the form of friends, not in the form of guilt, not in the form of silence, because you've become the exact thing the world tries to suppress. A man who sees, a man who acts, a man who leads, not by status, but by presence. So when they ask what changed, when they sense something different in your walk, your tone, your gaze, don't explain it. Just look them dead in the eye and say, the mask never fools me again. And now, I'm the one who knocks. You are the storm now. Welcome to the other side. Welcome to your final form. Welcome to warrior consciousness.